Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Trina Shanks. I'm a professor at the School of Social Work and Director of Community Engagement and help lead the Engage team at the school. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. I'm a person wearing glasses. I have curly hair. I have an aqua shirt and scarf on today. A note about accessibility. If you hit CC at the bottom, it'll be show subtitle, so you can activate the captions. You can also take that away if you don't want to see it. And if you want to see just the speaker, you can look at your view and go from gallery view to speaker view if you just want to see the slides and the speaker. We have a great session today. We'll be exploring storytelling, the arts, and how storytelling is being used to empower communities. Next slide. So before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to do a brief land and labor acknowledgement. As the Engage team, we're aware that we're a society that has a history of exploitation, stealing both land and labor for both Indigenous and Black communities. And we're committed to acknowledging this and working toward a more inclusive tomorrow. So let's take a minute to just read this acknowledgement before we get started. Thanks so much. Next slide. I'd like to take a moment to introduce the Engage team. We have Sonia Harb, who's our engagement strategist. We have Aisha Ghazi Edwin, who is manager and adjunct lecturer. Fatima Salman isn't with us today, but she's also program manager. And we have two field students, Blake Newman and Cleo Walsh. So I'm blessed to work with a wonderful team of people that can do wonderful events like this. And for this moment, I will pass it on to Aisha, who will be moderating today's session.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Aisha Ghazi Edwin. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. I'm a person with longish Black hair wearing a red shirt. As a reminder, students of the Engaged Community mini course and panelists, please stay on after the session ends for a few minutes. To all participants, this is meant to be an interactive session. So if you have questions, if you want to ask the speaker something, put it in the chat and we will unmute you. So as Dr. Shanks described, this is a special session really exploring storytelling, the arts, and how storytelling is being used to empower communities. I actually teach a class about storytelling, and we talk a lot about how storytelling has the ability to mobilize movements. It has the ability to really, bridge divides and differences. And as social workers, we're in the art of storytelling. Even if you're a therapist, you're helping someone reshape the story they tell themselves. So we are blessed to have these amazing guests joining us today. So please join me in welcoming. We have Aaron Foley, former Chief Storyteller for the City of Detroit and current Professor of Journalism at New York University. Eric Thomas, who's a current Chief Storyteller for the City of Detroit. And Jessica Caramore, who's a Detroit poet, activist, and author. So now I'd like to give you each 3 to 5 minutes to just introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about your work, and then we're going to go into some full panel questions. So please remember just to state your preferred pronouns, any identifiers to help make this session more accessible for everyone. I've listed these prompts on this slide as well. So Eric, why don't we start with you?
Me? Normally we always start with Aaron. So I am the current I'm the current Chief Storyteller, who is the runner-up in the universe to Aaron Foley. My pronouns are he, him. I am mostly identified by my ponytail and brown glasses. I'm wearing a white shirt. And the work that I do in the city of Detroit is helping to uncover and show residents at their best, right? What are they doing? How are they impacting the community? But I'm also a brand strategist and a marketing strategist. And so 2 or 3 of the things that I've been doing at the city that before I even got into a lot of the storytelling work is streamlining and optimizing the city's brand across all departments to make sure that people knew that it was the city that they were engaging with. Working on making sure things were easier to find, reorganizing the city website, making things a little bit more accessible, creating a section on access about language and all that kind of stuff so you could find it all in one location. in helping to build a new brand strategy called Opportunity Rising that sorts the city programs by their opportunities and who it's for. And so if you go to detroitmi.gov/opportunities, you'll see a breakdown, or you'll be able to visit a breakdown of access, business, families, and all that sort of stuff. Additionally, the website of the page has also been organized by need instead of by department. And so a lot of the work that I do is think about how are people going to engage with something and how to best serve. And I think that's kind of what storytelling is all about, connecting with people in a way that they feel seen, heard, and understood.
I love that. And we will definitely get back to you about just reorganizing things. So it's really about opportunity and need. That's amazing. Aaron, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Just one quick clarification. I'm not a professor, not yet, but it's on my wish list of many things as my career just kind of goes all over the place. But I'm Aaron Foley. I ceded my position to Eric. It's been a minute since we've both been in the same place at the same time virtually, but it's always a good time to share the space. Pronouns he, him, identify as a Detroiter displaced in Brooklyn, because that's where I'm at right now. I moved to New York last August to take a job here at the City University of New York, in which I lead the Black Media Initiative, in which we are trying to think thoughtfully about the future of Black media and how to support the many Black community media outlets across the United States. Prior to that, I did a fellowship at Stanford University in journalism, which I kind of got because I was chief storyteller in the mayor's office in Detroit. I'll talk a little bit about why the role exists and sort of what led me up to that, and sort of just storytelling in general. I'm a native Detroiter, grew up on the West Side. Don't know if anybody else is from the West Side, but what drives a lot of the work I do, I've been a freelance journalist, I've been a full-time journalist, I've been a writer, I've done books, I've done audio, all that, is making sure that native Detroiters' voices are uplifted, be they Black, Arab American, Latino, queer, the multitude of people who live in Detroit. With a certain soft spot for Black Detroiters, being that I am one. But the reason being is that for so long, especially if you look at the years 2009 to like 2013, that would be like right around the time of the economic crisis to when the city filed bankruptcy, there was a lot of media portrayals of Detroit from outside Detroit that were basically a lot of journalists kind of dropping in on the city, exploiting the Black and brown narrative of poverty, peril, all of that type of stuff, so that people can kind of gawk at it. I don't know if anybody remembers, but like 10 years ago now, there was a Dateline NBC special that showed people lined up out, among several other things that was problematic with that special, but it showed people like lined up around the corner to eat raccoons. And so many people in Detroit were just like, this is not the Detroit that I know. This is not the full Detroit story. So I've sort of made it my life's work to kind of make sure that the full story is told. In almost any position that I've done, I've tried to do that. When I joined the mayor's office as chief storyteller, it was a new position to kind of, make that mission a little bit larger, doing video, doing photography, doing stories that can't always be told, in mainstream journalism, in newspapers, so on and so forth. And I'm happy to say that not just the fact that Eric is here continuing the mission, but I think a lot of people are starting to understand that telling stories of people who live in the city and getting out into the neighborhoods and stuff like that. A lot of people are sort of adopting that. The Free Press last week, I believe, week ago, if not 2 weeks ago, launched their own sort of neighborhoods section, which looks very much a lot like what me and Eric do. But also other publications in Detroit are starting to think more about it. I know Cranes is, a few others are kind of like doing a lot of the things that and recognize the importance of why it's important to tell native Detroit stories. So that's I can talk more about that later. So
amazing. Thank you so much, Aaron. Jessica, why don't you go ahead? Jessica, you might be on mute.
I'm talking so much on mute right now. I'm Jessica Moore. My pronouns are she and her. I have on a hat, long locks, and some bright neon D earrings. I'll talk just real briefly about my work. I'm a poet, interdisciplinary artist. I'm a Detroit-based poet. I've performed all over the world for the last 25 years. I'm the executive producer of a rock concert empowerment weekend called Black Women Rock, Daughters of Betty. So I'm a void filler. I do a lot of different things, but I'm a writer at my core. I've written 5 books and published a lot of other poets, and started, helped other poets when I was based in New York City become published writers, continuing that work in a bigger way in the future. And I think I'm more of a truth teller than a storyteller, and an institution builder. And it's, and I think that's enough to start.
Do you want me to go ahead and share your video, or you want to talk about it first a little bit more?
Or should I show it now? Do you have time? Is it okay? Okay, so an example of my work during the pandemic, I guess I should talk about it if I'm going to show it right now. Is my tour was canceled. I live full time as a poet and writer, and I travel for work. I'm based in Detroit, but I make most of my money when I leave here. And I'm here because my mother lives here, and wanted more support around my son being born and in his life. But Our Bodies Back happened. A lot of things happened during the pandemic. My tour was canceled, and my 70% of my income for the year was disappeared within a matter of 2 weeks. And I had to shift gears and figure out how to make a living, and more importantly, how to still be a creative person and not just kind of become depressed over the shock of so many of my friends dying and becoming sick. So I did a lot of collaboration in 2020 that I never would have done had I been on the road. I'm normally too busy to be in the studio. As much as I've been in the studio, I've been recording like crazy. And I was able to collaborate with my friend Jonesy D, who's an amazing choreographer and dancer, and who directed this piece, Our Bodies Back, which is based on my 5th book, came out during the pandemic, which is pretty crazy too, but on HarperCollins. It was a big deal. I'm the first Black woman poet since Gwendolyn Brooks to be on HarperCollins. And most of the 4 books before that were on my own press, More Black Press, an institution I started building when I was just 22 years old in Brooklyn. And so Our Bodies Back is a collaboration of dancers of the African diaspora, women who were in different places. I think UK, Germany, and Canada. I think were 3 of the countries. And so it's beautiful. So it's my poem. It's choreo poem. It's poetry put to dance, and it's a collaborative piece. And so it's just an example of how I was able to sustain myself somewhat financially, but more importantly, creatively during the pandemic. So you can play the video.
Yeah, I would love to show a few pieces of it.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna.
You think you're gonna show a piece of it?
We can show the entire thing. It's about 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. If you have time, if you want to show it later, it's fine too, because it isn't short. And I don't want to show a piece of it. If I'm going to show it, I'd rather show the whole thing, or we just wait till later and show it later.
Well, why don't we do it now, and then it can help to kind of fuel some conversation.
Cool. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Just bear with me, everyone.
We want our bodies back. We want our bodies back. If Black women could be cut down, no, removed gently from American terrorism, who would break our fall? Which direction will we travel to feel safe? Wild is the wind. If we could turn in this skin, these sharpened bones, this brain full of power and history, who do we resemble? Invisible doesn't come in black. How many nervous breakdowns? How many funeral black dresses? How many fibroids? How many nooses? How many of our bodies must be raped, cut into pieces, and thrown inside garbage bags buried? How many of us blossom a beautiful tree of life and pray their pride isn't cut down the middle, reduced to trunks, where a close friend doesn't die, climbing their limbs, attempting to simply grow outside the spready soil they were planted? I put a spell on you. Holly Hobby ovens, Girl Scout cookies, and Barbie dolls. Don't prepare our revolutionary daughters born with capes and wings to have a pig's knee pushed into their backs. Girls raised by wolves taught to disappear, to be quiet, to not talk about it. How much black breath is allowed space in the state of Texas, a place that has sucked the life out of countless, miscounted, uncounted, brown, poor women die here. I got life. Sandra Bland got the death penalty for a traffic stop. Her body was 28 years young. How to make sense of our bodies. Bodies burnt by cigarettes. Bodies smoked out their own neighborhoods. Bodies with abandoned lungs and hearts. Bodies mistaken for women when they are still girls. How do we construct a survival guide, a poem for our daughters' bodies without throwing up our breakfast? How do our mothers' bodies not implode after telling our sons to comply, to not speak, to keep their heads down, to allow their bodies to be dragged by racist police? Jim Crow ain't never flown with this much wingspan. Eagles running for safety now, but the reach is deep in southern and midwest. Shadows the east, lands in the west. Texas, you will always be Mexico in denial. Poet Ryan Allen asked for his body back in 1996, and we are still waiting. We want our bodies back. We want our bodies back. We want our bodies back. We want the return to mother, without blood, without brains exposed, without humiliation, without bruises, without glass, without fire. We want our bodies back. We want our cities back. We want our culture back. We want our land back. We want our streets back. We want our freedom. We want our justice. We want our bodies back. We want our bodies back. We want them wrapped in white silk. We want them paraded around the White House. We want these flags you stand up for at baseball games at half-mast. We want national holidays to honor our bodies, our knees, our prayers, our ears, our genitals, our eyes, our fingers, our feet. We want 21 gun salutes when we enter a room. We want our bodies back. We want them anointed in oils. We want them worn around your neck. We want them remembered. We want them worship on Sunday. We want our magic to try to bottle. We want our essence to attempt to steal. We want our elegance, our sex, our walk, our pool, our recipes, our intelligence, our science, our stars, our history. I want my Moroccan nose. I want my holy water breasts. I want my side legs. I want my alien arms. I want my Ivory Coast mouth. I want our breath back. I want our time back. I want your foot off our girls' backs. I want all your badges back. I want you to evaporate into dust like swatted moths. Don't cut me down from the noose. Let my legs dangle for the devil. What a spectacular magic show. Why you turn the cameras off? Why you turn the cameras off? This is a simple ballet. You got front row. This is your venue. This cell, this home is no one's home. It's no place for a woman to die. You probably never heard of Judith Jameson, Catherine Dunham. Oh, we know how to get our legs in the air. We know how to elevate, use our bodies to tell a story, a middle passage of survivals, of lynchings. You have always left our bodies under your control. Don't you touch me. Don't you take me down. Don't touch my body. Don't touch my music. Don't touch my pages. Don't touch my car door. Don't come near my window. Don't talk to me in that tone. This body of work got work to do. I'm resurrecting my body in new forms daily. Watch for me in your deepest sleep. Black is the color of my true love's hair. Listen for my songs. Watch for my walk. Listen for my voice. My black girl attitude. Watch my body resist your death traps. Watch me rise. Watch my rebirth. Watch us rise up. Watch us rise up from this new Jim Crow, from these new unspoken apartheid laws. We want our bodies back. We want our bodies back. We will take them, protect them, remember them. Remember them. Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor. We will never forget your brown body. Your mind, your pride, your spirit, your love, your vow to do God's work. We want your drive from Illinois to Waller County back. We want all our daughters back, and we want them back now.
That was extremely powerful. Do you want to talk a little bit about the video, Jessica, and about the poem? You're on mute.
Sorry, I need a mute assistant. Yes, the women are extraordinary. I've never met them. I do know Jonesy. I've toured with him since '96. I know him as an MC and a poet, but I didn't know the other women. And they were on, from 3 different continents. So it's really amazing to watch. And if you look up YouTube, the making of the film actually moves me even more than the film, because to hear these women talking about the work and how they were able to body the work inside their own bodies. And to tell the story of survival from their own perspectives was pretty mind blowing for me. So yeah, that's it. I mean, yeah, I've done a lot of collaborations during the pandemic to stay creatively excited, and to also, because the pandemic meaning COVID-19, but the pandemic of racism is not a new pandemic. It's the thing I've been writing about my entire adult life. And so this was, in the wake of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd being murdered, and so many others that happened while we were all sitting still enough to actually pay attention to their murders. Some of us, like me and others, already pay attention to people, Black and brown bodies being murdered, but some other folks started paying a little more attention because we were all grounded. And so just an opportunity as artists to make art that's relevant to the moment. And so that's what we did. It's going to be actually screened at the DIA on the larger screen in some kind of virtual way for, I think, in end of April or something like that. So
amazing. And just logistically, we do send out the links to all the participants. So we will make sure to include the YouTube video in case there was some like internet interference while you guys were watching it.
Okay.
We'll send out that link at the creation of it. So I want to talk to now to all of you about a little bit about how, and as Jessica's film kind of really helped to illustrate, how stories have the power to really contribute to like social change movements, right? Like to really, like your film so much and your poem was so much about just dehumanization of Black people and wanting to reclaim the power. Can you guys talk a little bit about how you've seen your work in storytelling impact your community? Maybe it's policy, maybe it's Black Lives Matter movement, maybe it's other social issues.
So I'm going to be the one that's crazy enough to follow up a Jessica Care Moore poem and video. It was a ridiculous idea. But I think I'm a good primer for this conversation because I kind of sit in a very strange place. The thing that's really weird about this chief storyteller role is it is usually, I guess starting with Aaron's example, is kind of occupied by truth tellers. We tend to be the people that get in trouble for talking too much stuff, for people to kind of be like, what is going on? I think the most important job of a storyteller is to help you embody someone else's experience. I think that is when you see storytelling really at its greatest. We spend a lot of time talking about racism, injustice, racial equity, all this kind of stuff, gender equality, inclusion, rights, liberty in a very clinical or educational or academic way. And there are things that we know logically, but there's stuff that we have to know emotionally. And I think that's the gap that storytelling bridges. Without an emotional core, it's easy for people to kind of just dismiss it outright. And that's what you see in film and in music. And that's why music has been such a change agent because you feel the pain or the heartbreak in the depths of your identity, right? Even if you've never lived that life. That's why you see that like white kids are the #1 consumer of hip hop, right? They're not out here in these streets. But all of a sudden they're almost transported somewhere, right? It's not necessarily a lived experience, but it's a felt experience. And so sitting in this weird chief storyteller governmental role, but still talking all the nonsense I talk on Facebook and still getting into fights about, institutional racism and all that kind of stuff. And then being able to bring it back to city government and say, hey, look, man, I know this is what you think, but let me tell you what the streets are saying. I think that is what's most interesting to me about this kind of chief storyteller role and my career as a storyteller when I took on that title maybe 5 years ago to try to explain what it is that I do. from the photography to the design to the outreach to communication to the writing. The only way to encapsulate all of it was I help people share experiences, and storytelling to me is, I think, what that is really about. And I'll defer to the grown-ups.
I can jump in for a minute here. So I've always believed in, I don't want to say always because it's a relatively new term, but George Nnamdi, who is a legendary artistic figure in Detroit, came up with the term psychological gentrification. And basically what that means is going back to this time period in Detroit specifically, and part of the reason why a lot of stuff around the Chief Storyteller role blew up is because other cities were looking at what Detroit was doing. But so going back to because these cities are going through the same thing. That time period in Detroit, let's say 2009 to 2013, 14, 15, around then is when the national and the international image of Detroit was just so maligned across the world and how people viewed Detroit, that it sort of opened up this door for people to be like, Detroit is a blank slate, Detroit is a land of opportunity, and all of this like colonialist language started popping up in terms of people moving to Detroit and opening businesses, coffee shops and things like that, and saying like, oh, Detroit, nothing was here before I came here, before I, the entrepreneur, usually white, usually millennial. Millennials are going into their 40s now, but back then they were in their 20s. And that was very offensive to Detroiters because, again, we're already dealing with this malign image of ourselves thanks to the media and how people want to see Detroit. But also, keeping in mind that Detroit is an 80% Black city. We are one of a few, I say we as if I'm there right now, I'm in New York, but I see it outside my window in Bed-Stuy too. We're going through this. Detroit is one of a handful of cities that can call themselves a majority minority city. Definitely one of the few cities that can call themselves majority Black, while a lot of majority minority cities are majority Latino. So when the image of Detroit becomes that of a young white millennial and they just moved here and they moved to Corktown and the rest of the city is not looking like this, that causes an issue. This is where George Nnamdi comes up with the term psychological gentrification, because we think of gentrification in terms of rents going up, people being pushed out, that sort of thing, which was not quite happening in Detroit at that moment in time. And I won't say that it hasn't happened, but it's not as widespread as it is right here in Brooklyn. But psychological gentrification is when, again, the media images and what the picture of Detroit is, or what the picture of a place like Detroit is, and if it's not representative of the people that live there, people that live there do not feel like that they are contributing to the city. I may be Black. I may have lived in Detroit all my life. I may be contributing to the city in some way, whether it's owning property here, sending my kids to school here, running a business here, going to church here, going to the Barbie here, whatever. I'm an active participant in Detroit life, but I'm not seeing myself as the representation of Detroit. So you've got a ton of stories not being told about the people who have been in Detroit all this time, running the coffee shops, running the barbecue places, so on and so forth, all these places getting overlooked. And then when Cranes or somebody comes up with, top 10 places to do XYZ, and you see like 10 people who just moved to Detroit, like, 2018, that becomes an issue. So what the impact of storytelling of the natives of Detroit can do is course correct some of that, rectify those feelings of people not being seen. So when, part of the storytelling project at the city, and not just that, but what I've tried to do my entire career, and I got to shout out, a few other journalists who've tried to do the same thing, like Kat Stafford, and there's surprisingly very few Black journalists in a city like Detroit, but that's a whole different issue. but now people are understanding, when some of the stuff that we were doing with the storytelling platform at the city came out, a lot of people were coming to me and my team and saying, like, this is the first time I've seen myself like this. This is the first time I've seen Black people in Detroit. And maybe not the first time, but this is a rare opportunity to see Black people in Detroit where we're not the victim of something, right? Whether it's the victim of systemic racism, the victim of a crime, the perpetrator of the crime. This is something that celebrates the contributions of Black and Brown Detroiters, Latino, Arab American, Bangladeshi, because we were trying to cover all the bases, right? This is something that really puts us in a celebratory light and not necessarily the image of poverty, the image or just a non-existent image at all. And so that's sort of the impact that that comes with, like I said earlier, a lot of the publications in Detroit are starting to think twice about how they approach covering Black issues in the neighborhoods, and so on and so forth. And now you're seeing a lot of Detroit-centric coverage in publications with Detroit in their title. They should have been doing it all along, but again, we can have a whole separate conversation about that. But this is what happens when people actually see the value in their contributions. They see the value in the places around them. They see the value in Detroit. They see the value of their families, their friends. All that type of stuff comes with when you do storytelling in the way that we tried to do it.
I would just want to piggyback on one thing that Aaron said, because I don't know if you've seen, but we've kind of really ramped up pretty aggressively the storytelling again, now that I finally settled in to all this stuff. And I did just get an email where somebody said, this is the best way I've ever been covered out of all the stories I've ever been a part of. And so it is incredible to see what happens when people are telling stories about people that they respect and admire and elevate them and celebrate them. That's not looking for the sob story of it all, right? Sometimes you could just tell a positive story about a resident. It doesn't have to be steeped in tragedy.
Yeah, and if I could just chime in for a second, I'm a poet, but during the pandemic, what happened is a lot of corporations were trying to figure out how to not look like they didn't care about Black people. And so I became a corporate storyteller of sorts, which is, just say as a poet, it's just strange when corporations ask you to do anything, to be honest. I write poetry, I write whatever I feel like writing, and I'm not really inspired by money. Doesn't inspire me to write anything. And so I had the challenge of writing basically the new ad campaign for the Michigan Central Station. And I'd worked with my dear friend who was a cinematographer, Steven, he always calls me because they'll call him first and then he knows he has to call me to write. and I also wrote the Amazon pitch, Move Here, Move the World. I did that with him as well. And I literally got thousands of people who didn't live in Detroit anymore texting me and tweeting me and emailing me on social media and all kinds of places about how much it really made them miss the city that they were born in. When I moved back to Detroit, I'd been gone for 12 years. I lived in Corktown for 8 of it. My son was basically raised in Corktown. I lived downtown, the Loft at Merchant Row, when he was a baby. I just came home, and because I lived in New York and it had a different kind of existence for such a long time, wasn't really interested in living in neighborhoods. I was really a downtown girl and wanted to walk. And so King was the only baby at the Loft. I was at the Loft at Merchant Row before Nike and all those other stores that I don't really go to showed up. And so I kept Corktown for 8 years. And it's interesting because I really made it a point to integrate on Michigan Avenue and to have to integrate in a Black city. And I would argue, Aaron, that, you said 80, but I say that we probably closer to 85. Everybody ain't getting counted on the census. And, I had Black on my Rock. We would have production meetings. I would purposely integrate a certain coffee house on Michigan Avenue. It was just full of white men all the time and would take up a full table, one of those little shared tables. To have a presence because, if Black people don't feel like they're welcome, and it's the energy thing. It's not, everyone's welcome, segregation doesn't exist, I guess, but we self-segregate. And we also, we can feel the energy of a space. And I had a couple very public fights. I love Eric because he likes to fight too, with one particular spot that opened up on the corner of Trumbull that was calling their address New Detroit. That was literally in the title of their address. And I was having it wasn't supposed to go viral and people weren't supposed to know I wasn't mad about this. And I didn't call out the owner, but I just made a little statement about it and it became this whole thing. And so I've been, because to me, Detroit is the old Black, and it's no diss to the sister that has the store. I love her and support her, but I'm an old Black Detroit person. My daddy helped build this city, And I'm one of those people looking at the millennials in Corktown for 8 years who basically didn't talk to me. Or my son, you know, I have my neighbors. My neighbors are fresh, like my 2 or 3 left to right of me. They were cool. But I now own a house in Boston Edison, which I did that on purpose, moved into a historically Black neighborhood and bought something. And I've had more conversations in less than 2 years than I had in 8 years in Corktown. I have a real community, a real block. When stuff happens, I've got 25 people on a text message from a block club. If there's a fire, if there's a something. And that's how I grew up. That's old Detroit. And I had to go back to a old neighborhood to get that feeling from my son so he could see what it was like for people to actually communicate on the block. And that's because Black people are still here. There's some white people, some millennials and some new folks been here like 4 years, 6 years, but people been here 30 years, 40 years, you know, and that teaches the other people, the new people, how to act right. But the corporate storytelling is deep for me because I wrote the minority architects, you know, I wrote their ad campaign. I'm saying ad campaign, but it's poetry. Yeah. I did Boys and Girls Club. I did strategic community partners. You know, people just started reaching out like, Jessica, how can you help us tell our story? How can you show everyone that we are connected to community? So as a poet, I'm also a storyteller, of course, and a griot, and have been helping corporations figure it out. I'm doing an event coming up. I've done in-house stuff for Ford Motor Company, not public, but curated conversations for Ford Motor Company with me and Sonia Sanchez. And doing one that's coming up for TCF Bank, you know, and so it's weird, you know, it's weird for me, like a bank. What do you want? You know, like might pay my mortgage bank. That's what I want from the bank, some money. But they want me to help them be better humans and help them have conversations around race that are like touchy and scary to some people, but just kind of regular what we do over dinner. Most Black Detroiters anyway, everybody talk about race in Detroit pretty easily. And so just saying that there's that was been one of my contributions anyway into the corporate space to help some of these companies be more excellent and be more vigilant and really hold them accountable to, like the event I'm doing with the bank that's coming up. I'm saying I want them to talk back to me. I don't want to talk to the green dot on my Mac and they get to just like have me and then be inspired or have their little feelings. Like I want them to like ask me questions. And so it's more of an interactive event, which I'm really excited about, like this one.
Yeah. So I think you guys have all said such like amazing things. And we have some people in the chat who are also contributing. I mean, I just want to go back to this narrative that's being built that like Detroit is being saved by white people who are moving into the suburbs or moving from the suburbs to the city, and how you guys are helping to rewrite that narrative, and how like if you don't tell your story, someone else will tell it for you, right? And the people that were coming into Detroit and taking pictures of like all the ruin porn and all of that. So I think that it's amazing that you guys are really hitting it on the head by saying that like you help the city take back its story and tell the true story of the true people who have built the city and continue to build the city. Some comments we have in the chat. One is, how do we combat this kind of like two narratives of Detroit? How do we engage in this and help to like tell the true story of Detroit?
I don't know what are the two narratives. I mean, you know, there's the truth and then there's not the truth. You know, it's not. You know, it's just people. I mean, if you're talking about the new people coming in, I mean, and Eric and Aaron, y'all can speak to this, but I mean, you know what I mean? Like either you want to be great, you know what I'm saying, for the city you moved into or not. And if people want to step over history and bulldoze over things that matter to people's homes. I have a poem called Where Are the People that's about Cass Corridor. I was mentoring students at Detroit School of the Arts, and we were talking about the Cass Corridor, and one of my mentees asked me where the Cass Corridor was. And if y'all know anything about Detroit, you know that the DSA it sits in the middle of the Cass Corridor. And I was like, baby, you sitting in the Cass Corridor. But these young people have been marketed Midtown so much that they don't even know where they are anymore. And so this is the problem, right? Because now we're not talking about just millennials, we're talking about the kids don't know. So we got high school kids who don't know where they go to school, you know, like truly don't know the history of the neighborhood where they're actually being educated, then we have a problem. And so that's not the school's fault, that's the marketing. That's the marketing department that is connected to the city government, that is connected to the state and local governments, that has connected to whatever the little meeting they had that said, we're going to rename some stuff and push everybody else, all the homeless and the people who are addicted to drugs and our vets, you know. I mean, to me, like those noisy blocks full of people who are addicted to drugs and have mental health issues and who went to war for us and came back not so right. Like that's to me the poetry of our city. And they also have a place and belong here. And so it's a problem for me where everything's shiny in Detroit and everything's perfect. And you know what I mean? What's great about Detroit is that we're not New York. You know, we're not San Francisco. We're not LA. Those are great places. But I like Detroit to look like Detroit, you know, and I just pray that we don't get a Tarjay or any of the other stuff downtown, because I don't like Woodward. I don't like the way I love that Woodward has stuff now, but it's not like my favorite strip of things. I rather walk up Livernois and 7 Mile and then to walk up Woodward, you know, and it's unfortunate because we need more. I like Avalon being there, you know, there's some highlights there. I like that Avalon's there, you know, taking up space, and Detroit is the new black is there. But truly, you know, I think it needs to reflect more of what Detroit is. And we also have to think about neighborhoods and get past downtown and past the corridor, or what they call Midtown now, and get these neighborhoods looking a little better. So anyway, probably off topic, but
Aaron, do you want to speak to it? Because I've got a lot of opinions about the Tale of Two Cities narrative.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're getting ready to say, but I'll say this though. You know, you don't know that you grow up in a majority black city until you leave it.
Yeah.
And so I say that to say, and this came before I moved to New York. This came like when I went to college. I went to Michigan State. You know, go green. I know we're in the amazing blue space right now. But,
go green.
But no, like, so on Twitter, for example, there's this recurring conversation on when's the first time you had a black teacher? When's the first time you had a black male teacher? When's the first time you see a black teacher? And like, I've had black teachers, male and female, since kindergarten, K through 12, growing up in Detroit, right? So growing up in Detroit, you see black people at literally every level. I saw someone mention Coleman Young in the box, and yeah, you had your mayor was black, your superintendent was black, your business leaders were black, your pastors, everybody was whatever. And this is not to say that you didn't see white people, because I definitely went to school with some. It wasn't that many. And I went to the suburbs for like track meets and stuff like that and go to the mall. So it's not like you were insulated from white people, but growing up in a city like Detroit, you just see, you know, upper class, middle class, working class, black people at every level. And you sort of almost in a way, I don't want, you know, maybe taking it for granted is not the right term, but you just don't think twice about it, like I said, until you leave. And so when I started college, and to kind of bring it back to U of M, my first year at college was the year that the student was suing U of M over affirmative action. I don't know if anybody remembers that or recalls that, but that reverberated across several colleges in Michigan. And black students like myself, I remember being in heated conversations, being like, I went to a gifted high school, I had AP classes, and you all still think that like I got here on a technicality and stuff like that. Those are the things that kind of come into play when you leave a place like Detroit, that how the world sees us. And when I say us, I'm talking about black people now. How the world sees black people is how the world sees Detroit. And I think that's a large part of why we have these multiple narratives, is because of, you know, it's just because of this ongoing racist treatment of black people at large. People have said that Detroit is a blank slate because they don't see us here. They don't see our contributions as being worthy. So that's why we had that blank slate narrative for so long. People see black people as being expendable. Like, oh, you know, like they'll find another place to live. They didn't take care of this. They didn't do this. It's always what we didn't do, or what they perceive that we didn't do, that leads to all these types of all this type of treatment of how we are. And again, you know, it's part of like why we're not seen in the media. This is going to get very, very, very inside baseball a little bit. But if you look at the media industry at large, you know, like I kind of alluded to earlier, we have major publications in the city of Detroit. We are one of the few places that has 2 daily newspapers. It used to be very common, you know, 20, 30 years ago for multiple cities to have multiple newspapers. We're one of the few that's left. We got 2 newspapers, we got a bunch of TV stations, we got a public radio station. We have an active, healthy media market, but the vast majority of journalists are white or not Black at all. And so you're missing crucial narratives about the largest city in your market because you don't have the people of the city representing the city in these newsrooms telling the story. And so when people outside of Detroit are looking for a place to live, as they are here in Brooklyn right now, because everybody's looking for, you know, somewhere cheaper, or San Francisco, where I was last year, people will only see, again, like the white representation of Detroit or the non-Black representation in Detroit. And whatever they perceive to be about Black people already, they're going to take that with them when they come to Detroit and just not know how to act. So that's why we have all these multiple narratives. It's just like, it's a long, complicated thing about like how I think Black people have been treated in general. And again, how the world perceives Black people is how the world is going to perceive Detroit.
I have a couple, and this is y'all fault. You invited 3 storytellers, so you know we finna talk. You know we finna go hard, and you know we going off the rails. So 3 sections. First section is very short. I didn't go to college at all, so I have no dog in this fight. So y'all have this go green, go blue fight all on y'all. I did not. I snuck in here with y'all academics. 2, I recently wrote, well, before I got this job, like 2 months before I got the job, which maybe it's connected, I wrote an article in the Free Press called Why It's Important to Preserve Black Spaces. I think Aaron brings an incredible point. Like, I see these stories like, oh, I grew up feeling out of place as a Black person. Not me, dog. I joke all the time that you can tell a Black person from Detroit and other cities because we walk around like we own the city. Sometimes you see Black folks in other cities almost like shrink out of the way. Like they're almost like tiptoeing around to see. And I just like kicking people in the chest, like move, like as if I belong here, because I've always felt like I belonged here. But as for the tale of 2 cities, here's my take. I feel like Detroit is like 39 cities. Like I've never understood, like we started this idea of the tale of 2 cities when it was like Black versus white folks. When I was growing up, I wasn't living in Rosedale Park or, you know, Boston, Edison. Those are nice neighborhoods. I wasn't invited there neither. I wasn't invited downtown. I couldn't go into the law firms. I was from the hood. Like I was in a triple narrative growing up because I wasn't invited, right? I've always felt like there's all of these pockets. And when you see Detroit, you walk through it, you almost physically feel it. You'll go from a place that's almost desolate to a place that's ornate, to a place that is kind of middle America, to a place that has mansions. And then you go to a place and everything is in Bangladeshi, and you go to another place and everything is in Arabic. You go to another place, everything's in Spanish. And so we have these pod communities, but there's something that's interesting about that there's all this like preserved culture, that you get all of these different people that feel safe, right? That just feel comfortable to speak whatever language they want to speak, that feel like they're with their family. And it's been really exciting because I've explored more of those communities than I've ever done before as Chief Storyteller, because like Aaron said, it's important for us to get all of the narratives, to do it in all of the languages, to connect with all of the people. And it's exciting to see culture preserved. It's terrifying to see, like, the melting pot narrative freaks me out. So like the goal is like I pick up, like the whole culture and strain it into a thing and then suck out all its uniqueness so it can be as homogenized as possible. It terrifies me. I love the fact that there are places where you can uniquely be yourself. I think the question becomes, when you believe that Black culture is inferior, right? We believe that different means inferior. That's why we start talking about, oh, is it 2 cities? Like, no, it's a Black city. Welcome, right? Like, welcome to the culture. You don't go to China and be like, all right, it's time for white stuff, right? You've come to Detroit. It's time for you to discover what that's about. And that is, I think, what makes me feel so at peace here and so excited here. and why I haven't left, because there's a lot of things that I could be doing, but there's nothing quite like being with family. And that's how I feel.
Listen, Eric, it's nothing like feeling safe. And like, that's what's deep for me, like, you know, during the and then Aaron, about just for me, the shock when I moved to Brooklyn was white policing in Black neighborhoods, like watching. There was a huge blackout when I was in Flatbush in Brooklyn shooting a short film years ago, and this big huge blackout happened. And I just remember all these white cops on horses going up Flatbush. You know, Flatbush is full of, like, you know, people from Trinidad and, you know, Jamaica and Haiti and different places, and who live in that neighborhood. And so I took for granted that Black police, and we had Black cops, growing up, like Black, you know, police chiefs. And so I'd add that to the list of Black people that we used to see. We actually saw Black police. And even now as an adult, when a few times I've gotten pulled over, I mean, only time I get pulled over really is when I leave, cross 8 Mile to Oakland County, or I'm going to Dearborn. And so the Detroit cops don't really mess with me. And when I do get pulled over by them, they always know who I am, or I went to school with them. And so it's like, at least there's some familiarity where it's not just like, you know, you don't feel like, as soon as a white cop pulls me over, you know, all the PDS, you know, all that trauma comes immediately from myself, and even if my son is in the car. But in growing up in Detroit, you do at least have, I mean, the policing is never perfect, even with Black cops can be shady, but at least we have people in place that look like us. And I really took that for granted. There was so much white policing in Black Harlem, where I lived, in Washington Heights, in the Dominican and African-American community, that I was just blown away by it, you know? And so I feel safe around Black people. I really do. Like, I don't feel unsafe around brothers and sisters. I'm not scared of Black boys. I have a Black boy in my house that one day will be feared for a lot of different reasons. And so I worry about his safety over his life, but I'm not scared to be around boys that look like him. I love seeing us. And so there's something really, really beautiful about that narrative that doesn't get told a lot.
And can we just talk about safety? Every time somebody does a survey about, like, what do people in Detroit need? They're like, oh, it's safety. So they're like, all right, let's flood it with more cops. It's like, cops don't make me feel more safe at all. Like, and I do like having police officers that I can dap and that I know and from the hood, but it's kind of like, why are you in this coffee shop with a gun, bro? Like, you know, that freaks me out. Why do all of you have guns at all times? Like, maybe the traffic guy don't need a heater on him. So that it's been a conversation I've been having. But I think it's important for us to really break down what safety means. Sometimes safety just means familiarity and peace, right? And it's just a different type of way to communicate it.
Yeah, and the point you made, Eric, about, you know, the different ethnic communities we have here that people don't talk about. Like, I grew up on the border of Dearborn. I grew up on Ward and Tireman. So I grew up across the street from Lebanon, for God's sake. You know, I grew up in Hemlock Park. I'm actually writing a young adult novel in verse now called Our House in the Middle of the Street, about my relationship, about growing up on the border of Tireman. Because as soon as you cross over into Dearborn, everything changes. And about those cross-cultural conversations of how I got introduced to Islam. And I knew the difference between, because of growing up in Detroit when September 11th happened, and so many ignorant Islamophobic comments started to come out of people's mouths, even from the hip hop community, that was just driving me nuts. So I had a different perspective. I had a more of a global perspective on what Arab people were like. I knew that all Arabs weren't Muslim. I knew some of them were very much diehard Christians, and you know, grew up eating the food, and it was a part of my community. And it's just, yeah, it's unfortunate. And there's, you know, I mean, the Yemen food we have here, the Bangladeshi food we have here, like, we have so much good food from different cultures. We have good Ethiopian food, and that gets missed, you know, because we normally make it a black and white fight. And it's just like not enough, you know, white folks, you know, that there's not enough of them in the fight for me to be fighting with them. They really need to just concede.
It's 6%.
They live in a black space. And like, I used to tell my white neighbors when I lived in Woodbridge, I lived in all these little cute neighborhoods, right? So I'm in Woodbridge with my baby, and I told them the census form came around. I said, if you are a white person living in Black community, then you should just say you're Black on the census form. I said, there's no point in you being white on paper in this neighborhood. It just, come on, Eric. Like, it doesn't make any sense. I was like, because the census is just about money and dollars and who's going to get the money. So if you want your school to be great for your one day when the millennial gets pregnant in this neighborhood and you around black folks, you might want to just say you black and get us more the dollars, because that's all just, it's BS. It don't even matter. It's just, it's politics. So I always, on the census form, I mark the box that makes the most sense for the community I live in. And so I always think my white neighbors thought I was crazy, but I think some of them might have listened to me, and because you got to come into spaces with humility. I remember living in Woodbridge, and there's no shout out. The brother that owned the Woodbridge pub, I remember when he first opened up, it was 1 block from my house, and and there was a few times where he's a nice person, that he got robbed by some of the young cats in the neighborhood. And eventually, because at first he was looking at me all weird, and I was like, dude, I can help you be great. You should be nice. I can bring everybody in here. and eventually I did, because we formed a relationship. But you could feel some of the standoffishness, like you move into a neighborhood, you open a space, and then you don't know how to talk to anybody in the neighborhood you just moved your business into. And so, I'm get tired of being the abolitionist for humanity, for white folks who weren't raised right. And all you have to do is send a plate around. Take a plate, but to the sister that's been living on the block around the corner for 30, 40 years, and send her a plate of food and say, this is my new restaurant, and I would love for you to be one of the people who tasted our food first. That's just good home training. And that's, you grow tired of having to be that person, but that's what needs to happen. Like Brooklyn Local, Michigan Avenue, that was my extended office in Corktown, because Deborah's just a good sister, man, and she's a sister from Canada. She ain't black. She got good energy though, so I bring everybody in her spot. So it ain't about black and white. It's about where's your intention in our city, and people with good intentions will always get my support, regardless of skin. But yeah, you can feel the other thing, and black folks can feel when they're not welcome. So
I gotta say, about your thing about what's going on with the census and all that kind of stuff. I was talking to a white business owner who's a good friend of mine, and he was talking about how his insurance rates jumped several $1,000s, overnight. He was like, "Yo, what's going on? Like, my insurance in Ann Arbor would be, $20,000 cheaper." And so we coined this term together called geographic racism. And it was like, because they can't just say we don't like black people, they can say we don't like Detroit.
Right.
It just means black people, right? Like if the urban folks get like this, so we got to raise the insurance. I was like, so you're getting collateral racism. So if you want a selfish reason to stop being racist, if you want to live in areas with a high population of brown folks, then maybe you want to dismantle racism, because they can't aim that well no more. So the closer you are to us, the easier you are hit by a little bit of that geographic racism. And that's been a really interesting to watch that kind of unfold.
Let me just say really quickly, Jessica, I love the fact that you mentioned that you're doing a YA novel about Detroit, because part of the reason why I think there's so much misunderstanding about Detroit is that because, relatively speaking, we should all be fortunate. Sorry, I have a cat that's over here in the background. We should all be fortunate that we have ambassadors like Jessica who are doing books, films, poetry, all this multimedia. But there's not a lot of media in general about Detroit. Everything, I challenge anybody to go to a Barnes and Noble. If you're in Ann Arbor, go to that one on Washtenaw next to the Whole Foods, and look at the Michigan history section and look at the Detroit books, and they're all rooted in history. They're all rooted in a particular kind of history when the city was majority white. So there's a when I speak from someone who's done 2 books, a lot of publishers do like that kind of nostalgic look about Detroit, and that you do get a certain kind of like running theme of like what kind of books about Detroit can be sold and can be printed. But if you also think about like beyond our musical contributions, obviously, Motown, Anita Baker, One Way, Aaliyah, so on, Big Sean, Eminem, so on and so forth. We can debate Eminem separately, but beyond our musical contributions, think of like how many movies there are about Detroit, and then think about how many movies there are about like New York City or Brooklyn or something like that. Think about like how many TV shows other than Martin and Home Improvement are about Detroit and details a Black experience or details an Arab experience or details a Latino experience versus the vast number of TV shows, Black and white, about New York or LA. You know, New York, you got Living Single and Friends. Detroit, what do we got? We got Martin and Martin, right? so that I think what one thing that I would like to see happen in terms of, you know, if we're talking about getting a greater understanding of the many myriad narratives in Detroit, is giving something people to either watch or hold on to in the form of a movie, a TV show, a book. You know, we had Detroiters. I have my own opinions about that TV show. It was on for 2 seasons and that was it. Establishing Detroit as a cultural center where stories can be told is a vision I have. I don't know how that's going to happen, but you know, that's something I've always been frustrated with, is like I said, you know, go to that Barnes and Noble on Washtenaw and see how many, you know, real Detroit books there are.
Yeah, even, you know, it's deep because even the one in Allen Park, the Barnes and Nobles here, you know, they weren't carrying my book, which is on Harper, and I came in there like, if you put my book on the shelves, you're gonna make some money. You should put my book on the shelf. And so now they sell the book constantly. But actually, as the author, I had to walk into the Barnes and Nobles in Allen Park and like be like, pull their coattails, you know. But it's, you know, Aaron's deep. I'll talk to you more about this. We should be in touch after off of this talk. But there is a group of creatives who reached out to me who are trying to build just that. And, you know, we lost the film incentive, unfortunately. And I think there's a push now to try to get it back. And, you know, because there is the talent is here, right? So it's not like, but there's no infrastructure. Like we just got Michelle Riley like 2 seconds ago, right? Is the arts and co. I never lived in the city, you know, as an adult, you know, because I lived in Atlanta as well and New York. They didn't have a Bureau of Cultural Affairs. They didn't have an arts and entertainment, you know, that was functioning, not just a name, but actually a functioning entity that created infrastructure and funding to support the arts. Like, what city doesn't have that? And how can our city be the city that is? And we're just now kind of getting to it. And so a lot to be done, but I think that department, I hope, would be maybe someone to help spearhead. But I know that the artists and the creatives and people like you who want to see more stories coming out of Detroit and layered stories, right? Not just one story. And I'm screenwriting now too. And so that's the space that I'm very much in. And I'm hoping to like see more of it as we go forward.
So I wanna, I know there's been some comments in the chat. And I want to give Kevin Tran a chance to ask this question. It was earlier. I know you have 2 questions, Kevin. But if you could ask the first one, then we can go from there. So you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, so if funding was used as an incentive to get stories from a community, would that diminish the purpose of storytelling or the quality of the stories?
I think it only, so when I can't be paid off. So if I'm writing authentically. I don't know how to sell a car, you know, with a poem, but I know I can tell the truth. So people who are asking me to do something and they have a budget, which they must, I believe in artists having money. So I'm not going to do it for free. And so I have to get paid, right? But I'm not going to get paid to say it the way they want me to say it. So yes, it can diminish storytelling, but it depends on the storyteller. So that's my answer anyway.
I believe in paying people for their like minds, right? I mean, I think you're kind of talking to like a bunch of like kind of interdisciplinary artists on this panel, and so you know I do graphic design, I do video, I do writing, I speak, I do all this stuff, and I want to be paid every time I do any of it. And I think we spend I gotta control my need to cuss. We spend a whole lot of time paying consultants like 100 bands to come into the city to ask people to do stuff for free. And it takes me to a place. It's like, all right, I got 200 grand. Can y'all volunteer? It's like, what in the hell? Right? Like, what is going on? Like, one thing that I'm really trying to figure out how to do, especially right now, and I've been working on it and I'm not about to fully roll it out, but figuring out ways to pay people to write their own stories. Like people say, like, maybe they need some support. Maybe we need help on the editing. Maybe we need to help with constructing the stuff around it. But I just believe the stories have tangible value. Most autobiographies are about that. I get paid to speak and tell stories and connect with other people and tell other people's stories. People should be paid and compensated for their narratives. I think when it gets murky is when they're not able to communicate fully and authentically and in their entirety. And I think that's an interesting conversation to be had about the position that I'm in, right? I get that question a lot. You know, somebody asked me the other day, well, who decides what stories goes up? As if Mayor Duggan is sitting on my shoulders, stopping me from posting on Instagram. Trust me, and anybody who follows me on the internet knows, if Mayor Duggan is monitoring what I'm saying, I'll be out of here. The question for me is always, what are we trying to accomplish with the stories that we're trying to connect people with, right? No, I'm not currently doing exposés on city government. We got a lot of people doing that, right? That's what we have a cat staffer for. That's what we got, folks doing that stuff. What we don't have is people talking about the block club presidents and the fact that there are senior citizens walking out and cleaning up their lawns. And right, that might not have the click through for everybody else. But those are the stories that I want to make sure that people know that, every time I get into an argument with somebody about the city, they say, or not even city, take it off the plate, because people's use for racism is Chicago, right? Well, how come people don't march when people get killed by gang violence? What are you talking about? People outside in the streets all the time when people get killed from gang violence. The only reason you don't know that is because we're not paying people to tell their stories. We're paying white folks who live 70 miles away to come in and look around, do a quick head nod and go, see, told you ain't no marches. So that's kind of why I get a little frustrated with it. I think it's super important to pay people for their work. I think it's important to pay people for their time. I'm about that life. I don't know. I feel like, Aaron, how do you feel about it? I'm
going to bring up something different that based on being in city government, based on being a resident, based on being a journalist, and based on doing all these speaking things, you can throw as much money at people as you can, which is great. I 100% support people getting paid for their work. But if it doesn't reach an audience, which it will be for nothing. And, the Kresge's and the Knights are wondering, why we're throwing all this money out there. And it seems like, doesn't it, it's just me, or, when people get a Kresge grant, like the audience for people who get Kresge grants is like other people who get Kresge grants, right? Like it's a very small community. And like I said, like it's the way that, there is so much talent in Detroit, right? There are so many artists. There are so many people just doing everything. If you just drop a documentarian in here to just do like what everybody in Detroit is doing, we will be rivaling the level of like a Miami or all these other artistic, centers of the country. But it's not reaching a lot of it. I won't say none of it is, but a lot of it is not reaching the rest of Detroit beyond these circles. I know that they exist because I'm kind of part of the circles and I observe it for my own interest. But we seriously lack the infrastructure in the city of Detroit that's educating people about the history of the city, what artistic talent is here, all of that. One thing I tried to work on when I was chief storyteller was trying to partner up with the library system, DPL. A lot of people outside of city government or whatever think that the mayor's office or the city council controls the libraries. They do not. Like the city does not control the libraries, nor does the cities control the schools. These are all public entities, but you would think there would be some cohesion between the schools, the libraries, and city government. When you have all of these things, all of these things working towards the same goal, the city has arts and culture, Detroit Public Library has artistic endeavors, and then the schools have, Detroit Public Schools has their arts and their sort of thing, but none of them are on the same page with each other because, the libraries are cash strapped. The schools have their own problems, and, the mayor's office, like you've got not just arts and culture, but you got demolition, city council, water, engineering, buildings and safety, BC, all, there's like 300 different things going on at the mayor's office. And then where does that become a priority to align with some of these people that have the same things? The DIA, I've had several conversations with the DIA, but, aside from their own internal problems that are very well publicized, the DIA is still kind of siloed off from very much, even though it stands as a public entity, they still wall themselves off for some reason. And I say that as a criticism because, like I say, it hurts the city as a whole when you got all this stuff going on, but people are just like, well, how come so-and-so in Southwest Detroit, you know, how do we get down here? How do we get over here to the west side? How do we get over here to the far east side? How do we get out of downtown? A friend of mine who works at the Belle Isle Conservancy, we both went to Renaissance together, and we were having lunch about, you know, she was struggling trying to get the message out about Belle Isle because she's like, we're looking at all the numbers and the rosters and stuff like that. And the most frequent, everybody comes to Belle Isle for like giant slide and picnics and stuff like that. But when they were looking at like attendance at the museum and the conservatory and stuff like that, it was pretty white and suburban, or mostly like, you know, midtown, downtown sort of thing. And that's, you know, if you live there, it's fine.
Police are there, and don't nobody want to look at them. I mean, you know, the police are there now. So Black people and police, that's policing. You know, so Michigan police are parked all over the damn park. So Black people the police, but also the fact that like you don't have the people in the infrastructure that can speak directly to people outside of, you know, people outside of Grosse Pointe. Like you're talking to the people in Grosse Pointe, but are you talking to the people in East English Village, in Ravendale, and all the rest of the stuff on that borders Grosse Pointe? That's part of the issue that a lot of these entities have, is just like they have the well intention of trying to bring the city out, but they're not really bringing the city out. As soon as they made it that you had to have a little tag on your license plate, which means you had to have real insurance, they got rid of a very big portion of the population, because the insurance here, car insurance, is so high. So it's it's criminal what they do to poor folks to try to get them to get a tag. So LA Insurance, you go spend $1,000 million to get a tag, and then the tag expires and they can't afford to pay for the monthly insurance. So someone like me, I mean, I can afford to pay for my car note most of the time in my insurance, and I got my little sticker. But I'm talking people who don't have that, right? They got rid of a group of people that they didn't want access to Belle Isle on purpose by when it became a more private entity, where it became this state park, and then you add policing. That was on purpose. I never seen many white people in Belle Isle my entire life until the last 5 years, right? You know what I mean? Where it's a place where they even are. It was full of Black people when I was growing up. And so that's been on purpose. But reclaiming the park and reclaiming spaces is something that I'm very much vigilant about. So I refuse to not go to Belle Isle. I'm going to always go. But that's me. But other folks who have different situations may not feel as comfortable. You know, I remember jogging there. When I was running for some time. Like there was so many Michigan State Police. That's why I was like, damn, I guess I could run here at like 5 a.m. and I'm straight, you know. So I mean, it's safer for some, but for people who've had a relationship with police that's not so safe, it does feel different for some of us. So
yeah.
I just wanted to say this one thing. I give Aaron a lot of shout outs and stuff, and also Jessica, my super famous friend. But I think one thing that the neighborhoods did very well, and one thing that I like to resurrect and maintain in the neighborhoods is just the way you talk to people is why we're not penetrating. Like we get into this place where everybody gets real collegiate, and so then you get real grammar policey, and so it's not breaking through. And we're like, how come Tay Crispy is the person breaking stories instead of us? Well, that's because Tay Crispy is speaking in a language that people relate to. They feel connected to that. And for me, at least the way I communicate is some weird amalgamation between ratchet and not. But the question is always treating the local colloquial language like it is a language is really important. And so, yes, you're not going to, even if you pick somebody straight up out the hood, put them on a thing, and then wrap them in all this extra, you know, collegiate and all this academic language that doesn't look like where they've come from, you're going to lose. You're not going to get the population that you lifted them to get. And it's like, I wish you would just let people be themselves when you celebrated them. That's one of that to me, I think is something the neighborhood did. One of the biggest things the city Detroit ever did was, I think, Aaron, your 313 day video. And that video still has around 500,000 views, and it still gets love. I did a 313 day thing that was recently just to test the waters on it to see if that was still real. And it's still one of the last month, it's the biggest thing we've done, even though we've got the smallest channel, right? And it was just, let's talk, let's communicate in the way that residents communicate. And that it breaks through, right? It expands outside of that network. If we would just allow the city of Detroit to be the city of Detroit, I think we would connect with more residents.
Beautiful.
Wait, you got the.
Oh, go ahead, Aaron.
I was gonna say, Eric, you got the channel. So one big thing that everybody, but especially the audience, should remember is like a lot of people in Detroit are disconnected from the internet. Like, period. Like, that's why you got Josh Kennedy is there. Josh Kennedy. He should be fixing that. But everybody. Well, I don't say everybody, but a lot of people do have cable still, and yeah, like they still got Channel 10 because you know, Eric, like when Channel 10 goes out, the phone calls come in. I know you haven't been in the office, but yeah.
I mean, we're about to, and we can talk about this after because I really want to kind of pick your brain because I'm about to get real gangsta. And I've been telling people like, y'all, in every couple of weeks I do something more and more gangsta, but I just think it's important that people, the communities that we don't celebrate are like the super gangsta communities and the gospel communities, not the church community, because we love going to churches and be like, the only place where Black people are is in the churches. I'm talking about the gospel singing choir community. I don't see any of that anywhere. It's really wild. It's like living in a place where when you live in a city like Detroit and people say they can't find Black people to do something, you're like, that's on you, dog. That's I mean, if you can't find Black people in Detroit, you're not trying. That's been my argument since.
Yeah, my problem is when they do find people in Detroit, they don't want to pay them. You know, they don't want to pay artists. You know, they don't want to pay people that live here. And Eric, and you spoke to that about how they'll fly. I watched them fly my New York friends in. I'm not going to talk about the space. You know, musicians for like week-long residencies, put them up in hotels, give them good money, and then ask me to come for $1.
Come volunteer.
I don't volunteer for nothing, but yeah, except for some kids involved. But I mean, really, like, and so trying to teach institutions, like, because I live in Detroit because I want to, right? Not because I have to. And I live in Detroit. I'm based in Detroit, but I'm not a local poet. I'm a Detroit-based poet, you know, but my tentacles are international. And so they need to put some respect on that. The techno brothers that live here, Mike Banks don't have to live here. Mike Banks is a god in Japan and in Europe, but he decided to have Submerge on East Grand Boulevard. That's under talked about on the techno, what we've done for Black brothers and sisters who have done for techno music, who created the music and made it an international thing that got ignored by a lot of, unfortunately, Black journalists back in the day that weren't on their jobs to tell that story. And so there's a lot of amazing stories with Kevin Saunderson and Mike Banks and that community. And even the collaborations I did during 2020 with Jeff Mills and Eddie Folks, it was very purposeful. Like, we wanted to collaborate. We don't have to. Jeff lives in Paris and from Detroit, and Eddie's a godfather of techno. They don't have to work. We don't have to do anything together, but we wanted to do something as artists to come together to make something, but getting people to pay for it is something. And the Kresge point is, you know, and I'm a fellow because I applied 10 million times and refused to not get that $25,000. And I talked a lot of SHIT on the way. I don't know if we can cuss on here. I love to cuss. But
I'm having a hard time.
Storytelling with social justice.
I think everybody here is grown, right?
Yeah,
no kids here.
But yeah, you know, and so, like, you know, the Kresge rooms are I know everybody in the room, like, literally, and from the people who run it to the people who win, you know, for the most part. I met a couple new people, but those audiences are it's the creative class, which I hate that term, but it's that. And I'm not from that. Like, I went to Cody. I didn't even go to Casual Renaissance. I went to like Frank Cody High on Joy Road, right? We not a fancy school.
I went to summer school at Cody because I didn't graduate on time.
I'm so proud of you for being have a little Cody connection. Screw to go, baby. And so, you know what I mean? And so I don't come from that. And I'm definitely not an academic, though. I did put that in the chat. I did spend some time on a couple of college campuses. I raised a lot of hell at Wayne State and Michigan State. That's what I did best. I wasn't a great student, but I was definitely an organizer and activist. But anyway, I say that to say that you know, there's I often come back to the common denominator of money because it's important that we celebrate and appreciate the talent pool that is in this city, the writers and poets and musicians and jazz artists and painters and muralists, and that we treat them with the international respect that they deserve when they show up to spaces. And that might help the Detroit narrative be pushed along because I represent Detroit everywhere I go, and I've been all over the world. So, and I had correcting people that I'm not a New York poet. I'm London, New York poet. No, I'm a Detroit poet. It means a lot to me to be from this place, and I connect myself fully in my work. And every book I've written, Detroit is there. And yeah, that's it.
So I'm gonna let Lauren ask the last question. We're coming up at the end of our time. You guys are all amazing. So why don't we have one more question from Lauren, and then we'll have just some like closing thoughts.
All right, thank you panelists for this discussion. This has been great. So I'm a former journalist and I do communications with U of M's Poverty Solutions Research Initiative now. I'm wondering what advice you would give university departments that are interested in elevating community voices and highlighting the expertise of, quote, everyday people alongside our academic experts. Just any advice you would have on how to get started in that work, how to do it in an equitable way that's not just extracting people's stories and kind of turning them through the university machine. So thank you.
I think you got to meet people where they are. I've talked with the U of M Extension a couple of times, and they ask the same thing. It's like, the first thing I would question is on the team, like, do you have anybody that's representative of these neighborhoods? I mean, so often a lot of teams and study groups and cohorts go into spaces and they do come off as being very gawking and just kind of like, Black people do not like to be studied, right? We don't like to be like observed and we're not in a lab. But one thing that can be alleviated is like either, come with honest intentions in meeting people where they are and letting people know that like, we're not here to gawk, we're not here to observe, but also just being forthcoming about, what are you trying to accomplish? What exactly is the solution that you're working toward? Is it, if it's solving poverty, great. What led people to be in this poverty? And like, the question people are going to ask is like, what are you going to do to fix that? Right. People don't have the time or the wherewithal to just kind of be like observed all the time. They're going to want that immediate action, or at least that plan that says like, this is what if you all are going to come into our space and come, be observing our space, then what are you going to provide to, why should we welcome you here? Because it happens so often where, there's been so many studies, there's been so many like, journals and white papers, presented about like, we studied this neighborhood for a year, we did this, we knocked on doors. And I've had this conversation for years now, and those neighborhoods look the same. It's long overdue for like these studies and whatnot to actually turn into some proactive results, I guess.
What is they looking for? I don't. I agree with you. I think Detroit is over surveyed and sampled. Like what y'all trying to find out? Like what racism do? What systemic inequity is? Are people upset that they're poor? Sometimes. Most people don't even think about being poor from day to day. They're just alive. What do people need? Jobs, support, education, sustainability, scaffolding, opportunities to do more than skilled trades if they don't want to, but to do it if they do. It's a frustrating thing. And it's funny because I actually have a fellow from Poverty Solutions on my team now, which is fun because we're able to talk and share. But it's whenever I run into these surveys, because every single nonprofit entity and foundation is doing the same survey on the same people with the same focus groups, and the same people show up to the same focus groups because other people have time to go to focus groups. It's the same couple of things for the last couple of years. I know Aaron has probably been a part of those groups. I've been a part of a lot of groups. I've run a lot of the groups. At this point, people need to switch into the activating the plan part. Like spend all the rest of your money on activating the plan. If I walk into one more room with design thinking, one of my friends said design thinking is the academic term for teaching white folks empathy. And it cracked me up because what is design? Like, I don't need to walk in no more rooms with sticky notes where it's just like, are people sad? Yes. It's like, what? It's like, what do you mean?
I feel like that was shade. I feel like I can say it, but you can't. But that's planning and development. That's PDD.
Man, dog, it's driving me crazy. Like, I hear you. Yeah. We got it. Share the research. Okay, let's do it. We're gonna do it right now. We're gonna start right now. Share the research with each other. I know y'all spent $30 billion on it, but share it with all the nonprofits, all the community groups, all the organizers. Put it in a centralized database. Get everybody to do it together. Put it in a place. Talk to google.org. They just got a nonprofit. Make it so you can search it and stop doing research. Then activate all of it and spend the rest of your money activating it. And if you got to pay all the poverty solution kids to just pull up with some ladders and put the ladders up, that need to be what they're doing next. I don't know the only person that feels like that, but at that point, I think that's where we got to go, because I think people are over-surveyed and they're fatigued by it. And I don't think you're going to uncover anything new.
Can I just, not to cut you off, Eric, but like just kind of going back, I was trying to think of like an example. So like there's been studies, if it's more specific, like, people who go to study like Boynton, for example, the neighborhood that's immediately outside of the Marathon plant, and people studying like, why do people have high asthma cases there? Why do people, what are the systemic things that lead to, turmoil and distress in Boynton and other places? Immediately Carbondale, I think is the name of that neighborhood, immediately in the shadow of the Rouge plant. If it's a specific study that addresses that, I don't think anybody's saying like, don't do that, because you want to get to the root of an issue in a certain neighborhood. But far too often, a lot of the poverty studies, at least the ones I've seen, kind of state the obvious. Like, Black people are going to be poor because we have had the short end of the stick for as long as we've been in this country, right? Like there is nothing new about why, our education system is broken. Yes, a lot of people in Detroit go to public schools. The public schools are broken, not just in Detroit, but all over the place. That therefore you end up with an undereducated population that is not able to get a certain kind of job to sustain themselves and lift themselves out of poverty. You don't need a study to say that. So what, again, like if the studies were framed in terms of presenting some kind of like actual action, I saw something about like, you need proof. Well, there's the proof. The proof has been sitting here for like 20 years now. So that's the frustration I get from it.
So I want to jump in. So Lauren, it looks like you have a clarifying comment. Do you want to clarify for a second?
I appreciate what you're saying about kind of over-researching and what is the payoff from all of that research. I don't want to get into, too in the weeds about how Poverty Solutions approaches that work and how we co-design studies with community groups and try to make sure that there is an applicable takeaway at the end of it. I was interested in kind of the storytelling aspect of it, is when we're communicating our research findings, ways to involve Detroit residents or community members from across the state, from all different areas, in communicating back those findings, making it feel more relevant, more applicable, and doing that in a mutually beneficial way. So if there's anything else that you wanted to say to address that, but I do appreciate what you've shared so far.
Yeah, you do it with art, and you have with economic mobility. You can't have economic mobility unless you own things. So it has to be easier for, like, I literally went through hell to own a house here in the city that I was born and raised, I'm celebrated in. It was not easy for me to own a home here. It was not easy for me to get my loan. I had to fight for it. And so who's getting the loans? Who's getting the loans for new businesses? Who's getting the loans for homes? Who gets it? Who has the easier ride when that happens? I would argue that white men do, for the most part. And so that's a part. But as far as like uplifting Detroit people's stories, I think you use art. You bring in people who can help curate their stories. You can bring in a person like me or any people here, Aaron or Eric, whoever, just to come in and help curate a storytelling series. Put some of the faces of the community, get these muralists, give them some money, and have them paint some of the people in the community on the walls. I mean, I think in Brightmoor, this neighborhood, I'm looking at this, people like just use some of these neighborhoods just to jump their trash. literally in some of these poor neighborhoods where they feel it's okay to come and dump your garbage on the street. Like there literally some neighborhoods that are used as dumping spots for garbage. So, and I'm sure there's people in that neighborhood who don't like that. And so I think going into these neighborhoods and empowering them to tell their stories, you can easily make it like a mini doc film that you premiere in the neighborhood. But people want to feel like they're a part of it, and I think that's what you do. And you use art. Art is a really great weapon and a tool that's underused in that way. So that would be, Lauren, that's my suggestion, because art is at the center of like pretty much everything I do, and it does have a lot of power in making people feel. You can't come and like let them tell their own story. Basically, yeah.
I also I always tell people we spend a lot of time putting funders' names on signs when we build the thing after we did the thing with the sticky notes. I would love to see the residents who are a part of the research study on the walls and their stories on the walls, and it's like, who contributed to developing this? I think treating the knowledge and the resource in the same way that we treat the funders, I think, might be another thing.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful.
Erin, do you have any last comments? We are at the end of the time of our session. I know we could keep going. You guys are amazing. Do you want to add to that real quick, Erin, before we close out?
Not to this. I mean, I think everything that's about to be said. I want to say to Jessica, like, one of the biggest tragedies is techno in Detroit not being informed among the masses in Detroit. Like, I vaguely knew about it growing up. The techno I knew was more like DJ Assault type techno, but yeah, I mean, and I think that kind of speaks to a greater point, because I still have friends who, grown friends who don't know why we have movement every year. They're just like, why? But I go places here in New York, and I wear my Old English D fitted. And people see the D and they ask me, they don't ask me about Motown. They don't ask me about anything else. They do ask me about techno. And I have to kind of freestyle off the top of my head. Like, oh yeah, I know them. I don't know them. But I think that does kind of speak to the larger infrastructure. And the reason why I bring it up in front of the group is because I feel like, does U of M have the answer here? Is this something that can bubble up to the right person in terms of how is it that our cultural gems in Detroit are not known among Detroiters themselves, and how do we get to building the infrastructure so that we are teaching Detroiters. It's a hard thing to say that, like, a lot of people in Detroit do not know many of the things. I won't say all the things, but many of the things that happen right in their own backyard,
right under their noses, right?
And so how do we
the marketing, like Jessica said? We market hard to everybody else. We market hard outside. We don't market inside. That's kind
inside market. Right. And also we're underutilized. I just did a residency at Grinnell College in Iowa. I do residency work everywhere but any college or university in Michigan. I live up the street from Wayne State. I went to Wayne State. I went to Michigan State. I performed all over U of M's campuses like a billion times, and Harvard, Dearborn, all of them. None of them call me for residency work. Wayne State never called me for residency work. And so, yeah, I mean, but everywhere else, I turned down dentists. I turned down other spaces because I want to be, I'm in Detroit. My son is 14. Grinnell's trying to get me to come to Iowa in the fall, right? Do I want to be in Iowa? I mean, not necessarily. But I love Grinnell because Grinnell respects who I am, right? And what I did with their students the last 3 or 4 weeks blew their minds away. But what's Wayne State need? Or Michigan? Y'all need me to have an MFA, which I need. You know what I mean? Because I don't need none of that anywhere else. You know what I mean? But I've been in conversations with local universities, right? And then they want to ask me for something like that. I was like, I don't need no MFA to teach kids coming out of Detroit Public School. They don't know anything. I'm hitting college students over the head who don't know anything. As I'm teaching culture, right? I'm not teaching poetry class. I'm teaching culture, and so that's the problem. Like, the institutions that have the weight and the money are not tapping in, right? Because to the consultants, to the educators, to the artists who are the wealth of information that you have right under your noses, and that's not who you're giving the dollars to keep, because it keeps the city alive, it keeps the narrative correct, And then you're teaching younger people, the next one's up, the real story of Detroit. And I'm giving it to people who live in other places, you know, and our babies don't know they're in the Cass corridor. And so, you know, there's a lot of work to be done, but these institutions and U of M, you know, shout out to you for having this platform, but more of this needs to happen. And then the conversation needs to turn into actual like action and things and programs. I mean,
so, you know, on that note, we will be sending out a list of resources to all the participants who registered. So everyone who registered for this, even those who didn't attend today, will get information. So if you have things to promote, if you have projects to promote, please send them. And you know, for all the participants, we were talking about how Aaron was referring to how like the birth of techno was basically in Detroit. And the Movement Festival, we'll send some resources in that too, and the follow-up information.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to stop here.
Techno music. I mean, it's like they were the people who created the music. So
yeah. So I want to just end by saying you guys are all amazing. Thank you so much for just talking about storytelling and the arts and authentic representation and the power and the need to kind of take back a narrative. This has been an amazing session. And again, send me information that you want to share with the participants. We'll make sure to do that. And otherwise, I want to thank everyone for being on with us today. And Engage is taking a break for the summer, but we will be back in the fall. And we hope you can join us for more sessions on equity and inclusion and what's going on in the communities around us. Thanks so much, everyone. Oh, and participants in the mini course and panelists, we could stay on for a few minutes.